as I have said many times and will say until the day I die, economic development without workforce development is just gentrification.
Hi, I'm Getty Caucus, and this is the podcast on Hudson Valley 1, and we have our guest today, Abe Uchitelle, who's a county legislator from the city of Kingston with an information technology background and has been around the community for some time. And so, where did you come from, Abe?
Sure. Well,
I know you went to SUNY New Paltz.
That's right. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me, Getty. I'm really happy to be on the Hudson Valley 1 podcast.
Good.
So I have been here for about 15 years. I came to the area when I was 18 after growing up in Brooklyn, and I was even at the age of 18 pretty much done with the city life, and I went to SUNY New Paltz where I got my degree in political science.
Now I know that even before that you went to high school in a kind of high school where, for instance, what's this? Aaron Quinn went.
That's right, Aaron Quinn.
I don't know. Tell me a little bit about that, because he maybe like you or maybe unlike you, got pretty far in the IT world and team leader in a fairly big place in a fairly big company in California, and seemed to be bought the stone house here.
Yeah.
And then he threw it all aside and is a baker.
That's right. That's right.
You know, maybe that's a moral for all of us, that we people in information tech, it's in a way it's a platform that can lead to other things.
Sure. Well, I'll first mention that Aaron and I actually not only went to one of the same schools, but two of the same schools. So we both went to Stuyvesant High School, which is in Lower Manhattan. It's a science and math school in New York City. And we also went to the same Jewish day school in Brooklyn, where I went just for kindergarten. And he actually has a yearbook that has a picture of me in there wearing a yarmulke the only year I went to religious school, and I think that's pretty funny. We only figured that out after knowing each other for a few years. So you're right, Aaron went into technology. He was a software developer. That's actually how we first met. He was a developer using the Ruby on Rails language. It happens that my wife is also a Ruby on Rails developer.
And I will ask you at some point, be sure to mention what she's doing now, because
sure.
I understand her occupation is changing slightly.
That's right.
She's got a different employer.
She's about to start a new job.
The word Ruby set me off.
Yeah. So Aaron Quint was a Ruby on Rails developer. He worked for a company, a startup that was growing, and he was the CTO. And he ended up leaving that role and moving to a different company, a very large one, and he decided that baking was his passion, and I think it's a beautiful thing. Kingston Bread has been such a great part of the community, partnering with the folks from Rough Draft, and especially as someone who represents this district in government, I think it's so cool that we have folks that see what's going on here and want to be part of it, and also give back to the community, which these guys do a lot.
I really like the people at Rough Draft, and I like the place. I think it's a definite plus for Kingston.
Definitely, yeah. No, I think it's hard to remember a time when we did without Rough Draft, and they've just been such a huge part of the community. Even just last week during the awful ice storm we had, Kingston Bread and Rough Draft got together, and they were able to help bring supplies over to the warming center, which was really a huge lifeline, especially as all of the
Andy Murphy.
Yeah, the Andy Murphy. Yeah, sorry, not the typical warming center, but actually the emergency warming center that the county and the city stood up at Andy Murphy. And no one expected this storm to be as severe as it was, and having folks like Anthony and Amanda from Rough Draft and also from Kingston Bread and Aaron from Kingston Bread to just jump in and immediately come to action and bring food and things that people really need that were without power and without heat. So it's great to have them in the community.
Aaron lives in that stone house on Green Street, sort of about 100 yards down from the rough draft.
That's right. And my wife and I were pretty excited when he bought it, because we, many years ago when Aaron moved into the Stone House, we live on Green Street as well, and have for about 8 years. And at that time, Aaron was still a software developer, by profession, and he was speaking at a conference. My wife was also speaking at the same conference. It was a conference about Ruby on Rails. And we like to joke that Green Street in Kingston is one of the highest density of Ruby on Rails developers of any street in America.
Yeah, that's good. It's a great combination of colors. It's probably the flag of many countries at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Green and red.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. So there you were at SUNY New Paltz. Let's pick up.
Sure.
There, you liked the area. You decided to stay.
Yeah.
And like everybody else, you were young and wanted to experience a different lifestyle, but you also had a background. And a lot of people moving up these days to Kingston, particularly, have a background.
Sure. Well,
which they bring with them, and it's a potential resource for us.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think it's also, the area is so incredible and it speaks to so many people. And, when I moved here in 2006, it's one important detail to remember for me is that I was a cyclist, and I grew up not with my family, not owning a car and riding my bike, especially after September 11th. We stopped taking the subway for about a year, and we rode our bikes everywhere. And so when I moved up here, it was like, I was in this cycling nirvana, and it became everything for me. So I started working at a bike shop and riding about 100 miles a week. And that was a big part of why when that first winter break happened, or maybe it was the first summer break, freshman year in college in 2006 or 2007, I had the opportunity to go home to Brooklyn, and I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to stay here, and I really haven't left since.
The world of cycling has brought a lot of people who, I guess, think that this area is ideal for cyclists. Up and down, long flats. There's a guy who lives on a management consultant who lives on the back of Woodstock Mountain, and he's a cyclist.
Yeah.
And he described various places that he went, and it's amazing how that kind of interest, hobbies connect people just as well as occupations do.
Yeah, it's really incredible, the cycling community here. It's a big part of the reason that I made this my home when I was leaving college. And while I'm not an avid cyclist any longer, I still can see how awesome that community is. But I do want to share that there is something that really concerns me about the community and as it relates to cyclists. Mm-hmm. While there are incredible mountains and incredible flats and an incredible environment for folks that want to go ride, 40, 50 miles, even the Ashokan Rail Trail for folks that might just want to get a couple of flat miles, there's a lot there. Yeah. But when we talk about riding in the city of Kingston, it's actually very scary. And in my district, we've lost 3 cyclists in the last year.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's a place of Kingston size, let alone a legislative district, which is 1/3 of it, that there are 3 fatalities in 1 year.
It's really, these are also fatalities that have occurred where there is road work happening and there are improvements happening. So while I'm not implying that the road work caused any of the fatalities, I do want to point out that it's critical that we keep in mind the safety of pedestrians and the safety of cyclists as we work to reinvent the way that cars move through our community. And we really need to take a moment and really think about the priority that we put on cars moving quickly from point A to point B, and the fact that a lot of the folks that are riding bikes throughout Kingston don't own a car, can't afford a car, might not want to have a car. And it's really a shame that we haven't put ourselves in a position to keep those folks safe as well.
The mayor, as you know, is a great fan of cycling lanes, and I think he's come to better senses and saying, well, education is really important. It has to come first. So it's not the physical end of it; it's the mental end. It's that people have to make it part of our lives the way that Europeans do. So,
Right. I think that the awareness is huge. In Europe, if you go to a place like Amsterdam, you'll see no one wearing helmets, and that's because there's so many people that they're almost a mass of them of their own. They don't necessarily need that protection because the drivers give them space. They have dedicated lanes that are actually separated from the road in many cases, and just the sheer awareness that drivers have completely changes the behavior. So I think if we had more cyclists, the cyclists would definitely be safer. And that's why it brings me pain to hear people say, well, why are we putting in these bike lanes? People don't really bike. Did we do a study of how many cyclists there are? And really, cyclists in the city of Kingston, up until the installation of these bike lanes, have really been pushed into the margins. So I'm still very optimistic about the bike lanes, and I appreciate that the mayor has helped make that happen when we're looking at the Broadway improvements. But there's obviously a lot more work to do.
Just let's intervene. Let me intervene and say, you're the chair of a county legislature committee. Tell us a little bit about
Sure.
the committee and because I think it connects.
Yeah, definitely. So I chair the Law Enforcement and Public Safety Committee. So this is a committee.
Law enforcement and public safety. There where the bikes come in.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so we oversee the sheriff's office. We work with the district attorney's office. We work with probation. We work with emergency communications. So there's really a lot that falls under the purview of that committee.
And it's a new committee. I gather that there's a rearrangement of committee assignments that Tracy Bartell is the chair.
That's right. Yep.
And that's one of them. And
well, the
and
law.
you think public safety and police that there's a connection there.
Yeah, so the Law Enforcement and Public Safety Committee actually is one of the few committees that didn't have too many changes this year. So it's remained mostly consistent with prior iterations.
Who's the deputy chair?
The deputy chair is Gina Hansett, who...
Okay, so that's interesting. So she's a new legislator.
Yep.
Very much interested in both, I guess, environment and economic issues, and an interesting choice as a deputy chair.
Well, one thing I will say is I think to the credit of the norms that we have in the legislature, because while there might be rules for how things have to be governed, there are norms that we apply to ourselves to keep things running smoothly. And one of these norms is we typically will, if the majority party, depending on which party it is, or regardless of which party it is, the chairs of each committee will be from the majority party, but the deputy chairs will always be from the minority party, so that the leadership of every committee has a bipartisan composition. So Gina is from the Republican Caucus, and it's always good, regardless of what the breakdown is in the parties in the legislature, to have both parties represented in these conversations.
Well, there happens to be quite a new legislature that after years of being divided 12-11 one way or another, now it's 16-7.
That's right. It's a supermajority.
Gesture toward the minority is probably, I hope, appreciated.
Yes, and I think it is. And the truth is, while there might be 16 Democrats in the legislature, that does not mean that we all share the same opinion. We come from a lot of different backgrounds. We represent vastly different districts, and there's a pretty vibrant patchwork of opinions that are represented even just within our caucus. So you might find some of the winning coalitions for certain resolutions are going to be bipartisan coalitions, just based on how diverse the viewpoints are in our community.
Now, in thinking about the rank, you are, I guess, deputy chair of the legislature.
I'm the deputy majority leader.
That's right.
Yep. So this is a position
that brings up the word whip.
It does bring up the word whip, which is a word.
I'm from an English background. So
sure.
For me, a whip, when you have 630 unruly people, and a majority, you have a whole whip system.
Yeah.
And I never thought of it as connected to cruelty. And I wonder if the British have followed Ulster County's lead in banning the word whip. I kind of doubt it.
I doubt it, but time will tell. I think that there are two good reasons why we've moved away from using that term. Number one, the term originates from the whipping of dogs on a hunt. So there would be someone on a fox hunt to keep the dogs organized in a specific direction, and you would literally whip them. As a dog lover and dog owner, dog father myself, I don't agree with that at all. I'm not sure how I feel about dogs being used in hunting, in any regard, but regardless, that's the origin. It's a bit of a violent origin, and that's one of the reasons why it's good to move away from it. Another reason why it's good to move away from it is because it's really not accurate for the way that we tend to operate in the legislature. The notion that we have one opinion within the caucus that must be whipped down to the folks below is just simply not the way that we do things. So,
well, you have 16 people, so that's not exactly a mob, and you get to know each other pretty well and your opinions, and I guess the job of a whip or deputy or that function is really to see who agrees and who disagrees with a particular resolution or direction, so you can decide whether to change it or to push ahead.
Yeah, first of all, as you mentioned, it was a pretty historic and relatively recent change that we have 16 members in our caucus in our legislature right now. So we're still developing our process and kind of seeing how all of our members are going to work together.
They're still strangers to some degree.
We had one of our first full caucus meetings last night, and it lasted until 10:30 at night. It went for about 3.5 hours. So we're still getting to know each other. Let's say that.
Yeah, and even in Kingston, the three legislators are different. And
that's right.
They add quite a mix to what's already a conglomeration of people. Agglomeration.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about our Kingston delegation right now. Phil Erner and Peter Criswell and I all work really well together. We meet regularly. Again, it's I don't mean to imply that we only have one opinion. There's definitely differences of opinion, but we all want the same things. I think we agree on the vast majority, which is really exciting, because I think one thing that is important for us as representatives of Kingston is, Kingston's the only city in the county, and it's really the heart of Ulster County. And it's important that while we provide so much to the county, we also have a voice and kind of a strong presence in the community and in the legislature. I have to tip my hat to the prior District 6 legislator, Dave Donaldson, who definitely represented us in a very, very strong way. And while I don't agree with Mr. Donaldson on everything, I definitely agree that he left big shoes to fill in terms of leading our contingent from Kingston forward.
Yeah, well, three interesting characters. With I guess Phil Erner is getting a lot of attention these days, but we see how each of them, and I know many of them, fit in and we'll find out only as it develops, and it's kind of an interesting situation.
It'll be a work in progress every single day, right through to the end, because we are, there's a lot of growth that we still have to do in this county in terms of our form of government. Sure. We have, wasn't that long ago that the charter was instituted, and this is really only the second county executive that we've had since the charter was instituted. So there are certain questions of, institutional powers between the branches of government that are still being explored, and it's something that is definitely an opportunity for different legislators to take different viewpoints. And there's there's a lot of work still to be done to refine our form of government.
Right. Yeah, I know. I've been talking to people about. I happen to believe that Ways and Means should have a closer and constant view of the finances of the county, so that, rather than have it happen or not happen just before the budget comes out. And I kind of think it should be monthly or bi-monthly, so that, because this year the county has so much money that you want to invest it wisely, unless you don't mind the word waste thrown at you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the kind of a great example of an area where there is, a lot of evolution in terms of the way that the legislature works with the county executive. So, Ways and Means oversees all of the spending. Every contract and every expenditure that is above $50,000 has to go through the legislature, which means it goes through Ways and Means. Every legislative program that we want to move forward goes through Ways and Means if it has any financial impact. So that's really the financial oversight that the legislature can provide for the county. And there are questions about, how does the budget get presented to us? The legislature is the appropriating body. We really are the ones that are in charge of establishing the budget. The county executive makes the budgetary recommendation to us, but how does that process unfold? For example, if a department asks for an increase because they want to put together a new program, and the county executive decides not to include that budgetary increase in the budget, well, at the end of the day, it's the legislature's choice how all of these funds are appropriated. So how are we going to know if somebody in a specific department asked for an increase and didn't get it from the county executive? We don't want to create an antagonistic relationship between department heads and the county executive, but at the same time, we want to know what might be possible. We want to know what programs could be getting funded but aren't, and that's something that we're still working on.
Right. Well, it's too often it's bickering over particular lines rather than a sense of direction and a sense of the greater picture. But
yeah.
I hope that changes.
Yeah, as I said, it's a work in progress.
Okay, let's switch back to the tech end of it. When I was talking to Zach here earlier, I was told that there's a lot more going on than I had thought it was. And I guess that goes back to your Dragon Search days.
Sure, yeah.
Your Kingston Can Code experience.
Yeah.
And various other things, your wife's experience. So tell me a little bit about, do you think that there's the county could be, it could be an important source of employment and wealth?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, the technology sector, for one thing, was one of the first to adopt a remote work culture. My wife has been working remotely for, 9 years now, something in that ballpark. And so that's something that I think enables people to work from anywhere. And there's a lot of folks that have decided that they want to work from here because this is such a great community. It's such a great place to be. But I think there are still kind of an untapped set of opportunities to have companies that are here that are actually hiring from this community, rather than folks that come here and arrive here with their skills and with their income and with their career. I think we really, in many cases, the natural evolution of the tech community here in this region has really left behind a lot of people that are, that grew up here, that have been from here for generations, and that really have not had the opportunities that I think that our community really deserves.
Economic development intersects education and training.
Yeah.
That we think of, stealing jobs from some other state as a job of economic development, but there has to be a foundation of that relates to the existing population and the new population, and creates opportunity.
Right. Well, the nice thing about the technology industry is you don't have to steal jobs from anyone, because there's so much growth going on that if we create the right environment, we can have companies that are founded by folks in this community, or that, you know, are started in this community and hire locally, and you know, we don't necessarily need to incentivize companies in the tech industry to relocate here. While it would be great, I don't think it should be our top focus. I really think our top focus should be around, like you said, education, which in this industry we call workforce development. And as I have said many times and will say until the day I die, economic development without workforce development is just gentrification. Because you create an environment where folks come here, they move here, they have higher earning power, they have higher wages, there's a crunch on housing, and they're pushing people out of the community. Whereas the alternative would be if we trained people and our training track went alongside our economic development track, and we really unified them. If we really gave economic development, or rather if we really gave workforce development the same weight as economic development, then those would be able to kind of meet at the finish line, and we'd be able to hire local people. So really that's the change that I want to see.
So the phrase that you want to be associated with is that economic development without workforce development is gentrification.
That's right.
Now, that's a loaded statement.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, as I just explained, if we create an environment for folks to move here and move their companies here, and we don't have an infrastructure that's training people, mm-hmm. if we don't have a pool of talent that they can hire, then they're going to bring talent here, and that those folks are going to be competing over the same housing opportunities that are already limited, and we're going to see people pushed out of the community. And it's been happening for a long time. And you know, I'll tell you, so going back to a little bit of my story, you know, I stayed here after college. I had an opportunity to work for a startup that was actually based just down the street here in Kingston. And after working for that company for about a year, I moved to a company called then Dragon Search, and now it's called Dragon 360. We were, and they still are, a digital marketing firm doing a lot of work in technology. And as we were growing, and as the caliber of business that we were working with was increasing, we were working with companies all over the world. And we were hiring, and it was a challenge to hire locally. So we were paying relocation packages, we were helping people move to the area, and I saw what was unfolding here, and this is what we needed to do to be able to support our clients and to fulfill our mission. But it wasn't the way that things should be done. It's the way that things had to be done because we weren't, as a community, investing in training. So now that I've left that world and take some of that technology skill set into my consulting work, one of the first things that I started doing was working with a company called Albany Can Code. They've also rebranded. They're now called Can Code Communities, because it's not just about Albany, as you can imagine, with them being doing work in Ulster County and in Kingston, and they're really all over. Kingston Can Code was what I helped set the groundwork for. And that really was trying to remedy, and still is, they're doing great work. They're actually expanding statewide now. That was really trying to remedy what I think wasn't available for a lot of companies that are hiring and that just don't have the population in this community that they can draw from. These are companies that want to hire locally. They don't want to be paying relocation packages. They want to be part of the community. They want to invest in the community. They want to invest in training, but the framework just isn't there. And so that's what Kingston Can Code and the larger Can Code Communities organization is trying to work on. And I was really fortunate to be able to work with them as a consultant and then as a full-time employee briefly, to kind of get that off the ground.
Yeah. Well, I've been of the opinion that it's important to involve not only the community college, where there's a great relationship with the business community, but also SUNY New Paltz, and particularly now with the developments at Tech City, BARD.
Yeah.
Because I think that you don't want to set a low horizon for people and say you do this, and then if you're really good at it, you go up the next step. if you have a broader education, a broader understanding of the economic world, then you can find opportunities that you didn't think existed for you.
That's right. Yeah, I think one thing that is kind of interesting about this space, the tech space, and kind of the larger academic space, and these are things that you work through when you partner with community colleges and with traditional four-year colleges. Is there's computer science as an academic track, yep. And then there's software development as a career track. And unfortunately, those don't always line up. So and this is one thing that I think the community college has done really well, is to be able to create opportunity for both, where if you want to really get into the details of algorithms and technology and the ones and zeros, there's an opportunity there. But if you're really looking to set yourself in motion on a lucrative career that will really, create generational wealth and totally, improve your economic situation, there's a track for that as well. And I think that's an area where the computer science academic world, and I think community colleges are coming around. They're doing a great job. SUNY Ulster is doing a great job. But I think some of the other colleges really need to think about the opportunities that they can create if they're able to really partner with industry, if they're able to really create that career track that is really about gainful employment, not necessarily, only about the academic component of it. And I always point to my wife as a great example. She is one of the top developers in her field, and she has a BFA in photography. And that's been an asset for her, and it really hasn't held her back that she doesn't have a computer science degree. And I think those in many cases, those upper level degrees, those graduate degrees are for one, they're out of reach for many in the community, and for two, they don't necessarily prepare you for the real world work that you do in a career in software development. Because one thing my wife always points out, and I think is totally true, is when you're a software developer working for a company, while you might have gotten training in how to build software, the reality of what you're doing every day is you're not building software, you're fixing software. And that's a completely different skill set.
Mm-hmm. Now, every street you turn down in Brooklyn has people who are IT professionals, and the occupation, in the broader sense, is growing immensely. It's really what Wall Street used to be for the New York City economy. And we have this, as you referred, this world of where people are coming up here, and how do you build that connection? I think it may be time to get the people in that community to build institutions that add to and complement and work with the colleges.
Yeah.
And I don't know enough about how to do that, but I think it should be done.
Well, one thing I think that we need to overcome as a society, even more broadly than just one sector, is how do we help lift people out of poverty, yep, and make programs available to them that are going to help them do that. And one of the things that I think is a challenge when we're training people and when we're developing these programs is there's a lot of infrastructure in this state and in this country that is designed to make sure that we're not giving out opportunities such as free training vouchers or different types of programs. We're not giving them to the wrong people. And so there's this whole process of income verification that you have to go through if you're going to get access to funds to take one of these courses. And it is a hard process. And I actually have seen firsthand how challenging it can be for someone who's very low income, and it's very, very clear that they are a great candidate for this type of program. It's actually really hard for them to show that they're low income. I had a situation where I was helping get someone into a program that was going to be free training for them. They were an immigrant, recent arrival to New York State. This was one of the statewide programs that I was helping with when I was with CanCode Communities, and this was a homeless person. They were someone that was they were sleeping on their friend's couch, and when you're a recent arrival, or let's say you if you've fallen into bad luck, or you have any number of circumstances that could lead to homelessness, it's actually really hard to have the paperwork to prove that you're low income. Yeah. So when we talk about these types of programs, we have to connect the dots all the way through. So while private industry can do these types of programs, they have a really hard time actually accessing that talent. And while there's an infrastructure around providing social services to folks that really need it, there's not necessarily the connection with those private industry. So it really is a matter of kind of connecting all of the dots. And we do need to seriously think about changing the way that we set up so many barriers for people to enter into these programs, because it really does hold people down. I mean, that's really what we're doing with some of these income verification processes.
Yeah, well, we need the equivalent of a walkway to unite the two. And we're still using the example. See, this person made it, this one person.
Right.
And that horrifies me, because it doesn't, that's the one person who makes it that way, and that's supposed to be sufficient motivation for the other 99.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
Well, I think you need to, so there are a couple of thoughts about that. Number one, we need to change the way that we think about working with folks that have met many challenges in their lives, right? Folks that maybe high school didn't work out for them. Maybe college was completely out of the question for them. Maybe they were moving around a lot. Maybe they were in foster care. Maybe they were in shelters. And when you're in that environment, there are barriers everywhere for you to move forward. And I think one of the things that folks like CanCode Communities, and I wish more folks would think about it, is just, we're not going to let those barriers get in the way. We're going to tell people that we believe in them. If people, hit a wall and we don't hear from them, we're going to call them, right? We need to be able to really take that kind of no barriers approach to getting folks into these programs. So I think that changes the mindset from, kind of, rather than looking for those individual success cases and trying to pull them out, we really look at everybody and say, you know what, all of these people deserve to succeed, and we're going to take the approach that they are all going to succeed, and we're not going to let anything stop us. However, at the same time, for those individual people, those success stories are huge, because these are folks who probably don't see a lot of people like them in these industries, or maybe don't even know to look at these industries for an opportunity for them. And when they see someone like them, when girls see my wife as a successful software developer, or when people of color, see the, people of color that are in that industry, and there are not many women, and there are even fewer people of color. So it's a challenge. But those individual success cases really do help a lot in terms of recruiting people into those programs, because they just haven't been exposed to them before.
Yeah, you're very articulate. I think maybe we should conclude this podcast by asking you how you apply that kind of thinking to the committee that you're the chair of, law enforcement.
Sure.
And that there's the bridge between people who would protect the present policing system to the death, and there are people on the other side who say that they're hopelessly racist and that nothing positive can happen from the police department. You're the chair of the county committee. How do you solve that one?
Well, the first thing I'll say is this is a recent appointment for me. We've only held one meeting, and I'm still very much learning about the process. Actually, later today, I'm going to be heading over to the probation department to learn about how they do things there, and I intend to do that with all of the departments that we oversee. This is an interesting time to be chairing a committee focusing on law enforcement. we need to change the way that we approach law enforcement in the community. This has been clear for a long time, and I think it's been more broadly clear.
My solution was for the police to identify 20 officers throughout the county in different departments and to make them social workers.
Well, that's an interesting idea. I'm sure that
no guns.
I'm sure that the PBA would have some opinions about that, and I'm sure that and these are the kinds of ideas that we need to be exploring. And I think the relationship between policing and social services is huge. I mean, we need to invest more in social services. We need to not be sending people with guns to intervene in a mental health crisis. We need to change that conversation, and we need to change the investments that we put in these various departments. So that's something that I believe that we're going in the direction of. I know that we've made a lot of progress in terms of having a mobile mental health unit in the county that is integrated in the 911 call center so that we can actually send mental health professionals rather than police officers every single time.
Yeah, the sheriff has made some.
Yeah, and we're really fortunate to have Sheriff Figueroa as our sheriff at the county level, because he does, he is, interested in exploring these opportunities. If you talk to police officers, they would tell you that they don't want to be responding to mental health cases. I don't think they're a big fan of that work in terms of distracting them from the types of work that they actually got involved in policing to be doing. So my hope is that there will be universal support for increasing the investment in some of the alternatives to sending law enforcement every single time. One thing that I will say, though, and I really draw on the experience of a very tragic case where we had a murder of a very young girl in our community last winter. And, just because we're changing the nature of policing in this community doesn't mean that we're abandoning justice for victims. And I think that's where things like restorative justice come in, and that's why it's important to have folks in the policing space like Sheriff Figueroa that are willing to take a different approach and at the same time really center justice for victims and the restorative work that folks that have harmed really have to go through, and not just for the community's benefit, but for their benefit as well.
I think this has been a stimulating conversation.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
And I think that we do need to be thinking about what you've been saying more. More people need to be thinking about it rather than, I'm tired of pre-learned views just being expressed. I think we keep talking about people needing to get together and to have some more commonality than our political system presently allows. And I think thinking about the issues you've raised is a good start. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Getty. This has been a pleasure, and I'd be happy to be here anytime.
Good.